Aloha champions, and welcome back to another social studies video. Our videos are a little askew because of the 3-day weekend with President's Day, but we're going to start off our week with social studies. So social studies will fall Tuesday, Thursday of this week, with science on Wednesday and Friday for this week. So in today's social studies video, we are finishing up Unit 2 of social studies talking about mountains. We've learned how to read maps and how to understand the topography of mountains and knowing where their elevation is. We've also learned that mountains can be detrimental, especially to armies trying to invade other countries. But mountains can also be very beneficial. So we'll find out how mountains can help us out in our day-to-day lives here in Chapter 4, Making the Most of Mountains. To begin, we have our big question of the day is, how do people benefit from mountains? What benefit do mountains have for us who live near them? And before I begin reading, I also see a vocabulary term, so put that in my mind. We have crystals. Crystals are colorless or lightly colored hard minerals, such as diamonds, emeralds, rubies, and sapphires. Those are all types of crystals or quartz crystals. But let's get into it. Chapter 4, Making the Most of Mountains. In the 1700s, a man named Jonathan Carver explored the Mississippi River. On his travels, Native Americans told Carver about the shining mountains to the west, which were covered with large crystals. Carver thought that these large crystals could possibly be diamonds, mountains, and moisture. In fact, the crystals that the Native Americans described to Carver weren't diamonds. They were crystals of snow that melted in the spring and fed the rivers and lakes of Western America. Most people would be disappointed if they were looking for diamonds and found water. However, in the dry West, water is very important. The people of Denver, Colorado knew that very well. Here we have a picture of Denver, Colorado, its current city skyline surrounded by all the Rocky Mountains where it is. Their city is located at the foot of the eastern side of the Rocky Mountains. Denver receives only about 14 inches of rain a year, so just above what we get with 6 to 8 inches a year. The people of Denver need much more water than that to survive. Luckily, the western side of the Rocky Mountains receives far more rain than the eastern side. The solution was to tunnel through the Rockies to get more water. But why is the western side of the Rocky Mountains wetter than the eastern side? Well, because the winds that blow in from the Pacific Ocean carry a great deal of moisture. When the winds reach the western side of the Rockies, they are forced to rise to cross to the mountains, and as the air rises, it grows cooler. Cool air can't hold as much moisture as warm air can, therefore much of the moisture falls as rain or snow on the western side of the Rockies. By the time the wind gets over the mountain, they have lost most of their moisture, creating a desert. So here we have clouds, and as they rise up and cool, they can't hold on to that moisture and release all that rain. Collects, drips down into lakes, rivers, and so forth, where the dry air reaches the city of Denver. This is the same kind of phenomenon that prevents most of Phoenix and most of central Arizona from getting a lot of rainfall, is because we've got high mountains blocking all the rain and snowfall from getting to us here in the valley. Mountains and power. Mountain streams are valuable not only as sources of water, but also as sources of power. As streams and rivers travel downhill, they sometimes form waterfalls. The currents of the waterfalls can be used to make power. Hundreds of years ago, people used the force of falling water to turn water wheels. Water wheels powered machinery, and some machinery ground grain or wove cloth. Today, water gives power to huge generators that make electricity. Remember when we talked about those hydroelectric dams, such as the Hoover Dam? They block in all that water, release some of that water, and that water flows through the turbines, generating energy. Today, when there is no waterfall, people sometimes build a dam to hold back the water in a river. When the water behind the dam is released, it flows downstream rapidly. It has as much or more force than water going over a waterfall. So generator, your spinning turbine machines that make electricity. A dam is a large concrete wall that stops the flow of water, creating a reservoir behind it. This running water turns huge generators to hydroelectric plants that make electricity, and mountains make this possible. So mountains provide us with water, mountains provide us with electricity, all important things for our survival. Minerals. It's easy to make fun of Jonathan Carver for thinking that crystals on the slopes of the Rocky Mountains were diamonds, but in a sense he wasn't as far off as you might think. No one has ever found diamonds per se in the Rocky Mountains, but the Rockies are bursting with other valuable minerals. Gold was discovered in the Rockies near Pikes Peak in 1858. People rushed to the area to get their share of the riches. Mining camps and towns sprang up overnight, and very few people became rich from all that gold. Very little gold is left today, at least near the surface. But people discovered other minerals during this gold rush, such as silver, lead, copper, zinc, and far more. Other mountain ranges around the world also contain minerals. The Ural Mountains in Russia are rich in zinc, silver, platinum, and nickel. Miners dig these minerals out of the mountains and send them to nearby factories. Pennsylvania's Allegheny Mountains are full of coal, as are the Appalachian Mountains in Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Coal from the Allegheny and Appalachian Mountains helped American industry to grow in the late 1800s and early 1900s and still provides much of the energy for the East Coast. Here's some cool facts about making the most out of mountains. 10% of the world's population lives high up in a mountain. Coal is still an important non-renewable resource. Today, approximately 40% of the world's electricity is generated by coal. The U.S. state of California depends on the snowpack on the Sierra Nevada mountains for water. Since 2001, the mountains have received less than normal amounts of snow. This has created an extreme drought in the state. They're suffering similar weather patterns as us, where it's been extremely dry and we're not getting the snowfall that we're used to power or to provide us with enough water that could potentially build into power with hydroelectric dams. Farming. Some people make a living farming high up in the mountains. Often they will raise animals. People in the Andes Mountains down near Chile, where we're currently reading about in The Dreamer, they raise llamas and alpacas. And people in the Himalayas, they raise yaks. Some farmers in the Alps herd goats on the high pastures during the summer. And as you have discovered, these animals are all very sure-footed. They are used to traveling up and down hillsides in search of plants to eat. Farming is somewhat easier on the flat top of a plateau, but it is hard to grow crops on steep mountainsides. For hundreds of years, the people of the Andes and the Himalayas have used terracing to create fields. In southeastern Asia, terracing is used on a large scale to grow rice. Terracing turns mountain slopes into giant staircases with lots of flat surfaces for growing crops. Farmers build stone walls on the mountainsides. They then fill the area behind the walls with dirt, and this creates a series of step-like flat fields. So, a couple vocabulary terms from this page. We have industry. Industry are businesses that manufacture a product or provide a service. We have yaks, a type of animal similar to an ox that lives in the continent of Asia. And we have a terrace to build level surfaces on a mountainside. So a terrace might look like a large staircase as they slope down to prevent potential landslides or erosion. Here we have some examples of this terracing where they'll make big, wide open steps and kind of gradually bring it down. And the water trickles down from the top down to the bottom. Mountains can also be used for recreation. Today, mountains also attract lots of tourists. These tourists come to enjoy mountain sports such as sledding, snowboarding, and skiing for those snowy mountains, or even with South Mountain, you've got hiking and mountain biking and horseback riding as a constant draw of people wanting to go to that mountain. Skiing developed long ago in the mountains of Europe and Asia. People used skiing to travel when snow covered the ground. Archaeologists have found skis that they believe were made almost 9,000 years ago. These ancient skis were carved out of bones or wood. No one knows when skis were first used in warfare. We know that in 1200, Norwegian soldiers traveled on skis to spy on their Swedish enemies. Norway and Sweden, both very snowy countries in northern Europe, and to travel around on skis, especially when it's snowy, is very helpful to them. Over the years, skiing became a very popular sport. Skiing competitions began in the 1800s, and it was introduced as an Olympic sport in 1924. Skiing is still a popular mountain sport today. We also have mountain climbing. People who are looking for other challenging pastimes can try mountain climbing. Some people enjoy hiking in the mountains, others like the challenge of trying to climb the tallest mountains in the world, such as Mount Everest. Perhaps the greatest challenge of all is climbing to the peak of the world's tallest mountain, Mount Everest. The temperatures are freezing. The winds are very strong. Snowstorms come up unexpectedly and the air is thin and has very little oxygen. Here we have a magazine article talking about this group who climbed from Mount Everest. Over many years, many people have tried to climb the mountain, but they have failed. Then, in 1953, a New Zealander named Sir Edmund Hillary and a Nepalese named Tenzing Norgay managed to reach the top of the mountain. Later, Hillary explained what it was like to try to sleep in a tent on the mountainside. He described the wind as it screeched across the ridge, causing the most awful noise. He described how cramped the tent was and how he and his fellow adventurer Norgay struggled to rest, hunched up in sleeping bags, unable to stretch out in freezing conditions. Hillary explained that time seemed to move very slowly. Then, as he and Norgay anxiously awaited the light of day, since Hillary and Norgay reached Everest Peak in 1953, thousands of others have followed. Some climbers have made it to the top and have made it back, but many others have not. More than 200 people have frozen to death or were overwhelmed by avalanches while trying to reach the peak. But why do so many people risk their lives trying to climb Mount Everest and other tall mountains? Partly, it is because human beings like to challenge themselves. But it may also be because human beings are fascinated by mountains. And hopefully after this short unit on mountains, you're starting to develop questions about mountains as well, how they can be beneficial, like in this chapter, how they can be preventative or a barrier, and what kind of animals call these mountains home. So hopefully you've enjoyed this short social studies unit. We'll be moving into our next social studies unit with our video on Thursday. But after you've taken some time to watch this, you've got 5 to 10 questions to answer on Google Classroom. Take your time, answer it slowly, do your best, and stay awesome. And I will talk to you real soon.